Hi, and welcome to the I Teach Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 135. What can capsaicin teach us about CVSS scores? So, capsaicin. This is a interesting little chemical. 8-methyl in vinyl 6-non-amide or anamide. If you care about the chemical composition of it, it's a funny little chemical that acts as a toxin. And if you don't know exactly what capsaicin does to the human body, you're probably somebody who thinks ketchup is spicy. So capsaicin is it is a chemical that, when processed by human tissue, it basically simulates burning or additional heat. It is a poison that is effectively created, that plants have effectively created as a defense against predators, so that way their seeds can carry on. If you didn't know that, capsaicin is basically what makes spicy things spicy. That is the ultimate thing. It is the chemical that makes spicy things spicy. Capsaicin is kept in the placental tissues of the fruits of most chili plants. And so, as you know, against a lot of popular belief, the spice in a pepper does not come from the seeds. I don't know how that got started. I don't know where that myth got formed from, but it is 100% false. Because the placental tissue, the tissue around the seeds, is actually where all of that heat comes from. Has nothing to do with the seeds. So if anybody tells you to pull out the seeds because it makes it less hot, they're lying to you. They have no idea what they're talking about. They may just be trying to get you to distract you or lie to you so that you don't think it's as hot as it is. Anyway, whole point about this is that, again, capsaicin is what makes spicy things spicy. If you were to basically isolate and pour capsaicin on your skin, it also has some minor acidic properties to it. It can very much irritate your skin. It can definitely harm your digestive tract. And it is, again, a poison that plants use to defend themselves against predators or animals that are going to eat them. Just like caffeine. Caffeine's also a toxin, but we'll probably talk about that at a later date. Anyway, capsaicin is cool, and one of the ways that we measure capsaicin, we measure spiciness in peppers, or hot sauces, is Scoville units, and that is an interesting little measurement, because what is a Scoville unit? How did Scoville units come to pass? How does it relate to capsaicin? And I'm here to tell you that Scoville has almost no relation to the capsaicin level in a pepper. Now, it kind of does in a way that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it really doesn't. It doesn't evaluate the exact level of capsaicin in a pepper or capsaicin in a hot sauce or whatever. Scoville scale was made by this dude called Wilbur Scoville, who basically came up with a method of evaluating the heat of a plant. And the way they do this is they take a number of people who are trained in tasting hot and spicy things, and ask them what the Scoville unit is. Like, how do they rate it on the spiciness scale? That's how they get Scoville units. It has nothing to do with science. Literally no fucking sense in science. It's basically, how hot did you think this was? And they give you a measurement. And that is really weird because it's almost defined as as if it were scientific. Like everybody's like, oh, it's Scoville unit. It looks like it follows this logical scale. And while it might actually do that, adjustment to the mean might help adjust Scoville units to something that could approximate actual trend data of spiciness. There's no actual like concrete or definitive information as to how that measures appropriately, because there is another quantifiable identifier for this, which is called quantification by HPLC, which basically takes a distilled version of whatever plant or spice or fucking hot sauce that you're using and measures the exact amount of capsaicin in it. That's the actual scientific method to evaluate and scale heat. But Scoville units, it's entirely bullshit. It's people basically giving their best guess. They might be trained, but it's people basically like, yeah, I think it's about that hot. Which, okay, it might be very difficult to tell you how hot something is to you as a person because everybody has a different spice tolerance, but that's not scientific. There's no scientific mean there. Well, that's a lot like how vulnerabilities exist inside of the world today. In cybersecurity, vulnerabilities, exploits, they are all very much measured in a very weird way. There is if you look at most news articles that come out about vulnerabilities, you'll see that they say, oh, critical vulnerability. And usually the way that they're measuring that is off of what is called a CVSS, or Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And there are now 4 versions of this scoring system. And while each iteration of the scoring system has gotten better and better, it still lacks a lot of things. Now, it's going to be kind of difficult to go into the entire history of evaluating vulnerabilities and exactly everything that's gone into them. I've done a little bit of this in the past, but to give you the 50,000 foot view of the CVSS Common Vulnerability Scoring System, it goes like this. You measure the attack vector of the vulnerability first, and whether you need to be on the network, you need to be adjacent to it on the network, you need to be local to the device, or you need to have actual physical control over that device. Attack complexity is either low or high. You have the attack requirements, which are either standard user or you have to be present to the. You either have to be present at the device or there are no other attack requirements. Privileges required. You either need no privileges, need low privileges, or high privileges. And user interaction. Do you need any user interaction? Do you need passive user interaction, meaning like they do something that triggers your thing? Or is there no user interaction required? Then, as part of the CVSS score, you also measure the potential impact and potential initial impact, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA triad. And you also do that for initial impact and additional impact, meaning if this vulnerability were to then scale out, how would it affect the CIA triad later on? And then there are additional metrics such as will it affect safety? Is it automated? Does it affect recovery? Does it affect value specifically? How much effort does it take to respond to this? How urgent is the provider attaching to this vulnerability, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of little measurements in there, or even more than what I've said. And going into each and every measurement will be kind of tedious to anybody listening to this. Eventually, we'll probably go over it in great detail or length, one by one. But for now, just know that CVSS kind of rates everything. But how do you rate that? Again, these are things that some of them are measurable, like the attack vector being network, adjacent, local, or physical. Those are things that you can actually measure. Hey, I can do this over the internet. I don't have to have direct connection to this device, or I need to actually be touching this device in order to exploit this vulnerability. Those are some actual measurable statistics. But like the impact scores, confidentiality might be high, it might be low. Who knows? And there's high, low, and none. So there's less granularity there than what you would normally expect. Like there's no like medium, there's no critical. It's higher, low, or none. And so I'm like I said, it's not my job to poke holes into the CVSS score because it is it does at least give us a measurement. It does give us a baseline to identify vulnerabilities and those that are critical. But there are issues with it, just like there are with the Scoville units and measuring capsaicin and actual spiciness of an item. CVSS score might not be a great indicator of what's actually going on with the vulnerability. And I'll give you some examples. So there was a vulnerability detected this week for popular software. I'm not going to point it out yet because it's, anyway, I'm not going to point it out, but the vulnerability was for a particular piece of software, and it's a critical vulnerability. They basically tell you that it's a remote code execution vulnerability that could allow somebody to take control of your system. Well, in researching the vulnerability, if you actually dig into the exploitation and what needs to be present in order for this vulnerability to be exploited, you have to have a very specific configuration on your server. And in fact, you have to knowingly shut off some security protocols that are enabled by default in order for this vulnerability to be exploited. So, even though it is a critical level 10 vulnerability, the chances that you would be directly impacted by this vulnerability are not they're not great, because you have to knowingly decrease your security posture in order to do this. On top of that, it's less likely that you'll get compromised because, the vulnerability, while it still exists on a system that you are, that is not directly vulnerable to it because its configuration is proper, there's no rhyme or reason as to why it would be issued as critical. It's critical to those who are in a vulnerable state, correct, but not everybody is in a vulnerable state. And so the blast that comes out for this software is it's vulnerable for attack. You have to patch now, and everybody should be patching this as soon as possible. When in reality, it's well, you have to dig deeper. You have to understand exactly what this vulnerability is telling you, what the exploit is. And it does help to have a proof of concept out there to measure against. Just like if you get told that a pepper is really hot, man, this is super hot, and your heat tolerance is somewhere in the middling, you might be tempted to try it just because, hey, what's hot to this person, what might be hot to this person is not hot to me. And again, there are also different types of heat. There are some heats that are slow burn. There are some that are quick and smack you in the face hot. There are some that'll make you sweat and poop your guts out, shit your guts out once you get home. There's the Taco Bell hot, which is, diarrhea basically. Anyway, the CVSS vulnerability measurement is less there are measurable and containable aspects of it. But again, not every critical vulnerability, as the CVSS rates them, are applicable to your organization or even a threat to your organization. And so it does help to have that knowledge in there, which is why you should have somebody who you can call or rely on or on staff who knows how to analyze these threats, knows how to review them, and knows how to respond appropriately to your organization's threats and vulnerabilities, so that you're not wasting time on a vulnerability that might not affect you. And, overall, as security practitioners, we should always be striving to patch everything all at once. We should always try to remove any vulnerabilities that are in the system, because just because it doesn't affect you today does not mean it's not going to affect you tomorrow. I get that. However, with the ability of everybody having a work day and, limiting their amount of time, and they have a limited amount of resources, which is what time is. Time is a resource. Maybe not spending all of your energy trying to patch something that doesn't actually matter. That time can be better spent doing other things to help secure your environment. Improving your layered security, your security in depth practices. So while the CVSS does give us a good baseline. It doesn't necessarily tell us exactly or how impactful a vulnerability might be to us. And I'll give you another example of another vulnerability that comes out. There are tons of vulnerabilities that come out every day for software like Chrome or Edge or Firefox. And Chrome, Edge, and Firefox patch almost daily. They release patches almost daily. And some of the vulnerabilities that they patch are critical, are level 10 out of 10 vulnerability. Some of them you don't want on there. But in a lot of scenarios, those vulnerabilities don't matter because the way that they're exploited are not something that is actually conceivable for most organizations. Again, you don't want to have any vulnerabilities existing on your system if you can help it. But where vulnerabilities exist and where they can be exploited, those are entirely separate things. And that's kind of where the noise comes into play. So again, there are a lot of different ways to interpret the information, a lot of different ways to respond to having critical vulnerabilities within your environment. One of them is to say, have a zero tolerance policy. I don't want any vulnerabilities in there. Another one is to have a structured and defined methodology of reviewing and analyzing vulnerabilities as you know about them so that you may be able to appropriately manage your vulnerability footprint and assess risk as it pertains to your system in particular, not just, hey, we have a vulnerability, let's patch it. And the CVSS scores don't give the full story in how much time and what it takes to actually remediate a vulnerability. Again, the CVSS score, the CVSS rating on a vulnerability is not necessarily supposed to reflect the actual remediation of that vulnerability. All it's supposed to do is give you an indication of how severe and critical it might be of importance to patch that vulnerability, to remediate it. But giving you the instructions of that is 100% on the vendor or the manufacturer or the developer to tell you how to patch that vulnerability, how to remediate it. There was another vulnerability came out again this past week. This is being recorded on May 23rd, 2026. So there was a vulnerability that came out earlier this week. It's actually a news article about a vulnerability last year that had been patched by the manufacturer and deployed, and it was being found that organizations that had deployed the patch were still getting compromised for this vulnerability because the vulnerability, as part of the remediation notes, the vulnerability required that the connector be restarted, this LDAP connector be restarted. And that was something that if you just briefly looked at the vulnerability and the remediation, you were like, oh, okay, I'm covered. I fixed this. Without knowing that you actually had to do an additional step to remediating that vulnerability, you probably never knew about it until you got owned. And so again, vulnerability, the CVSS score had no indication of that, probably had no identifier for additional steps required or complication of remediation or complication of exploitation. It doesn't give you any really good indication of that. And so, again, it's a simple scoring system that in aggregate will give you a good idea of what a vulnerability looks like as far as severity is concerned, but it's not going to give you the in-depth knowledge. Just like I can tell you that a Carolina Reaper pepper is 2.3 million Scoville units, but until you actually taste that fucker, you're never going to know how spicy it is. And there's still going to be people who, even if they know exactly how hot that Carolina Reaper pepper is, they're still going to go after that pepper. They're still going to eat it because they're crazy. Just like there are people who are crazy and they're not going to patch anything. They're not going to look at any vulnerability scores. They're just going to ignore it because they just don't know. So some other practices that you can use to help you defend against vulnerabilities in this circumstance. Again, working on defense in depth is key. I know I talked about this a little bit ago, where just because vulnerabilities come into play does not mean you should immediately be vulnerable. It should take several pieces of failure for your organization to become owned. So that missed patch or that missed vulnerability should not completely own you. You should have proper configurations for role-based access control. You should have principles of least privilege so that devices aren't able to, or accounts aren't able to access everything all at once everywhere. Isolating key components away from the standard network layer, making sure that you have VPNs and proper traffic controls around those VPNs, making sure that you have antivirus, MDR, EDR, making sure that you have a SIM and you are looking at your logs, you have alerts for logs, you have things looking out for anomalous behavior. Having all of these things in place will help keep you defended, even if one piece should fail, even if an attacker should get in. These things will all help. Having canaries or honeypots, having access to advanced support or advanced security definitions, and being able to do threat tracing and threat monitoring, and looking at your activity live will all help in making sure that just because one vulnerability exists in your network, you're not completely owned. We, as security practitioners, and those of you who are in IT or run a business and are the IT person, you guys, we are all in a situation where we are waged against, we have a war being waged against us, even though we are being peaceful, even though we are not trying to eat the plant. We are still getting sprayed with capsaicin constantly, because it doesn't matter what vulnerabilities exist or if there's a vulnerability in your environment or not, you are always going to be under attack, and you're going to be under attack just like your Fortune 500 company, even if you're a small mom and pop shop. So take the time to do the things correctly. Take that time. The CVSS score, again, is a good measurement for how vulnerable something is or how severe a vulnerability can be, but it's not the whole story. Having a deeper understanding and knowing exactly where to spend your energy on will help you leverage your environment better, will help you better defend yourself, rather than going out and shoving whatever hot sauce is on that gas station shelf into your mouth on your chalupa, and you spend the next 3 days shitting your guts out because not only did you eat really dumb hot sauce, but you also were having some Taco Bell. That's all I got time for today, guys. Hope you all have a great day.